Welcome to Language Surfers Podcast, a space with fresh waves for the mind, dedicated to create a platform where professionals from both language industry and academia can share their professional experiences, and where we also explore different career paths at different stages. Welcome to a new episode of the Language Surfers Podcast. My guest for today is Ronait Tynan, and I'm really glad and happy to have her on this new episode. Ronait, thank you so much for your time and sharing your experience with us. I'm really grateful and honored to have you here.
Thanks, Anka. I'm really happy to be here.
Perfect. So, just before we go into our conversation about your professional experience, I would like to let the audience know that you are currently the manager of language services at PPD, which is part of the Thermo Fisher Clinical Research Organization. But you have such a long and vast experience in the localization industry that I'm really looking forward to hearing about you. Yeah, so Rone, first of all, I'm really interested in asking most of my guests what was that helped you decide to study or start a career related with localization, languages, cultural awareness.
Yeah. So I come from a bicultural background. So my dad is Irish, my mother was Spanish. So I guess it's, kind of part of who I am. I grew up in a household where we spoke both Spanish and English. So it was pretty much kind of part of language was part of me, and still is, and I really always kind of had a focus on wanting to learn languages. I grew up also in the Basque country, so in school we would learn Basque. I was really bad at Basque actually for a very long time, and sometimes I wonder, if that was, I was a bilingual kid, and I was, my brain was already sort of wired with two languages, and I had a lot of interference, maybe. I'm sure there's some science behind it, but then it suddenly clicked at one point, during my teenage years, sort of Basque clicked and something happened in my brain. And then, I studied other languages, and I really enjoy languages. And a lot of it as well is, I come from a household where my parents were both teachers and they were language teachers. So language was also not just the language. It was about, learning the whole culture, being immersed. I used to go in the summers. I used to go to Ireland to see my family. And, nowadays, maybe not to say that there are no cultural differences between countries anymore, but I think it was even more prominent then,
Mhm.
like the fact that my cousins would eat cornflakes, that was like, wow. I go to Ireland in the summer and I get to eat cornflakes, and things like that. So it was very different cultures, and just a different way of looking at life. And, it broadens the mind, my mom used to say a lot, and I think it's completely true. And it's something that I really enjoyed as a kid, and it's just kind of stayed with me, I suppose.
Yeah, so definitely having your parents as language teachers was also somehow the natural path for you, to say so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, we talked a lot about what would you like to do when you're older. You're like, you have an advantage because you already speak English, and it kind of was just instilled in me, I guess. And then once I also became good at languages, then it really made sense for me. A lot of teachers would tell me, "Wouldn't you want to be a teacher?" And I go, "No, no, 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 no." I
Yeah,
don't want to do what my parents did, kind of thing. Now, sometimes I think about it because, part of being a manager a little bit is, coaching people and mentoring people, and you realize, some of the things that teachers do that are so valuable.
mhm.
But at the time, like the teenager that I was, now I don't want to do any kind of thing that my parents do. I want to do something different, even if it stays within the language. So I thought about, being a translator, being an interpreter, and that's it's always been very clear for me since I was young, that I was going to go in that direction.
And what did you study and where did you study? Did you study in several countries or only in Spain or?
So I finished high school in Spain,
Mhm.
and just because of how the system was at the time here, just the subjects that they would study, I wanted to go straight into language and just study
Mhm.
language, culture, and anything related to the language. Whereas at the time, you would still study a little bit of math or, do kind of some subjects that I just really wasn't that interested in anymore. So we looked into colleges in Ireland, and I ended up studying in Trinity College. And languages there were just you just studied language. Of course, you studied linguistics and cultural literature, but everything related to the language that you had picked. So I picked French and Russian, and really happy there. I spent some of my best years there, I think, in university, great university. And then I also did a master's in DCU in Ireland as well. So I ended up going back and living in Ireland for quite a while.
Yeah. And then when you finished your academic path, have were you tempted to work as a translator and interpreter, or you directly applied to have an in-house position
Yeah,
in
so
a company?
so the funny thing is that while I was doing my master's, which was in translation specifically, I really loved terminology. Like it
Hmm.
just really, I thought, oh, terminology, this is amazing. I love it, love the whole idea of standardization and, standardizing language. And so there was an opportunity to go to the European Parliament to do
Hmm.
a stage, and it was with the terminology department actually. So I did that. I went to Luxembourg, and it wasn't very long, it was only a 3 month
Hmm.
stint, and I was doing terminology, met some great people that were also in that department coming from different universities as well, and really loved it. It was great. Um, but it really just hit me that this is not for me. I don't want to be sitting in an office working in front of the computer which is what I do now. But at the time, I thought by myself in my house, because that's kind of what I thought was available, and also for the European Parliament, like there are opportunities there. And when you do a stage, of course, you're already familiar. So, there are opportunities to maybe join, either the European Commission
Hmm.
or the European Parliament. But I really didn't enjoy Luxembourg. um, just as a culture,
Hmm.
it just didn't appeal to me, at the time. I was young and I wanted to, like, just explore different things, and, just always been a little bit into an alternative kind of culture. So, I didn't feel Luxembourg was alternative at all. So, I just thought, I don't know about this, and I didn't see at the time that there are different positions in the language industry that you can go into. I just thought, okay, you're either a terminologist or you're a translator, you work in house or you work on your own, and that's it. I
Hmm.
just didn't envision at all, didn't have anybody telling me, what are you talking about? There's a lot of, project management kind of jobs. You can eventually be a manager or, a director or whatever, a VP of some company. It just didn't even cross my mind that that was possible. So I ended up applying for jobs to go back to Dublin, to Ireland.
Hmm.
And I loved writing, and I still do. I really like writing. So I went more into the writing side of things,
Hmm.
and I got a job as a writer. And I did that for a number of years before going back into translation, so I don't know, I kind of just took a segue somewhere, and it seemed really natural to me at the time, and I think that's probably how I've landed every job that I've had ever since. It just seems like a natural, I don't know if I want to call it progression, but just the next step, let's say, and it just always kind of felt like a natural choice.
Yeah, that sounds very great, very well, and I think it's something that some people can also envy in the most positive way, right? Because some of people out there and even listening to this podcast are might be struggling to find their path or even to pivot at a specific moment of their professional life. So it's very nice to hear that you had such a linear progression as you mentioned, and that you were able to find your path without struggling too much.
Yeah, no, I think I've been lucky for sure. Um, Also, I think it's to do with being able to be flexible,
Hmm.
and to adapt. I think that's one of the most important things I've learned in my career, just to keep that open mind. And I think we're lucky in this industry in that sense that a lot of people that study languages, I think naturally we're open minded, because that's what, like I mentioned earlier, you're studying a language. It's not just about the language and the grammar and being able to read it. It's a whole way of communicating, and it comes from a different perspective. People are in a different culture, they have a different way of looking at things. So I think you just naturally, it becomes part of you as a person, that you have flexibility or adaptability. And I think that's something that, if you're not, maybe to look at it and realize, okay, well, I already have this little bit of adaptability and flexibility because I'm learning something new. I'm learning a new way of communication and a new way of looking at life.
Hmm.
Let me hone that a little bit more and see, how I can open myself up to other opportunities. And that's kind of, for me, that's what I did. I went into writing, and it was kind of, yeah, I think I could be good at this. It was, I'm still probably going to learn something, and, I'm not going to be stuck at home, translating stuff. And a hundred percent respect to everybody that does that, and the translators are the backbone of our industry for sure. But at the time, for me, it was, I really don't see myself doing this, so I'd rather go into an office and, like, mingle with people, but I'm still writing, and I'm still, doing something with my languages.
Yeah, exactly. And if you are to speak about your career, you've had several positions as a team lead manager.
Hmm.
Uh, could you tell us a bit more about this switch from being an individual contributor, where you are being evaluated or assessed for your own contribution, your own performance, compared to when you are a manager or a team lead, where your performance is evaluated based on the performance of your own team?
Yeah.
How is that switch? What type of mindset? Especially this would be relevant for first time managers, right? Because there's
Yeah.
no book like this is what being first time manager means. Read it and apply it. So I think
Yeah.
that this would be a really interesting perspective from
Yeah.
your career.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think I was very lucky in the people that managed me. I've
Hmm.
had really good managers, and people that have always been very supportive. That have taught me some, hard lessons I've had to learn as a first time manager. I mean, I've made plenty of mistakes, and I've had challenging situations for sure because of lack of experience.
Hmm.
Um, and I guess even if I went through them and I wish certain things would have been different, or that I, would have managed a situation differently, at the end of the day, I think it has allowed me to learn and be a better manager because of it. But anyway, back to your question. I think I've always gravitated towards kind of being a lead of some sort. So I think as a project manager, just managing your own projects. I mean, you're still working most of the time in a team, right? And helping each other out, even if you have your own projects. But um, doing like the switch between an individual contributor to a manager, I think it can be quite hard. When you first do it. And some of the things that I learned is, you're nothing without your team, sort of thing. So you really have to look at everybody in your team, and not everybody in your team wants to be managed in the same way, has
Mm-hmm.
the same aspirations. So I think it's a lot about learning, okay, what ticks you like every day at work, which is different than another person. And some people communicate also differently. And you can't make everybody your friend. I think that was one of kind of the hard lessons that I learned. And not everybody's gonna like you, or like maybe the way that you do things or agree with you. And sometimes you do have to put the company, first, and certain decisions first, and at the same time, trying to be humanize things in a certain way, so that those hard decisions that an individual contributor may not understand in your team, because they don't agree with you or they don't agree with what the company wants to do, um, to make it a little easier on them, by just maybe explaining what's why the decision is being made, or why certain things have to happen in a certain way. Sometimes it's about seeing the kind of the forest for the trees. I know that's maybe a stereotypical way of describing it, but I think a lot of individual contributors, especially when you're a first time project manager as well, you're focusing very much on one project at a time, or maybe you're
Yeah.
doing 20 projects in a day, but you're very much focused on that little part that you're doing at the moment. um, and one of the things that you have to do when you're a manager is you have to look at the overall as well, and not just the projects, how they kind of all go into the same place, how they all contribute to a larger goal, but also how each person, contributes to that goal as well. And they have their own strengths, some things that maybe they need to work on. um, I think it takes a while, to realize or to understand that part, that not everybody thinks like you or does things the same way as you, and that it's okay. Sometimes it's actually really great
Mm-hmm.
to have some people in your team that are really good at something that you're not.
Yeah.
And make them realize that you're really good at this, and this is one of your greatest strengths. And why not make it even better? It's not all, I don't know if it makes sense, but for me it's not all about like working on your weaknesses.
Yeah.
I actually think working on your strengths might even be better. I think it probably makes us happier. And if you can find a job or a position that guides you in that direction, I think that's what I found very satisfying for me. you know
And would you say that the cultural aspect is also something that a manager should take into consideration? Because, especially nowadays, right, in such a globalized world, you may be sitting in Spain but work with people from different geographical areas, totally different cultures. How can a manager integrate these cultural aspects, working with people probably from cultures you've never really physically interacted on a daily basis?
yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a challenge. I think it's become more of a challenge as my career has progressed, in the sense that, I started as a manager where everybody was in an office,
Mm-hmm.
everybody, even if it was people from all over the world, they were all living, let's say in San Francisco, so
Yeah.
everybody was already within a culture in San Francisco, even if they're coming from their different, backgrounds and beliefs, etc. But nowadays, you're a manager and you have somebody actually physically living, in San Francisco. Another one is living in India. Another one in, Budapest, and
Yeah.
from all over. So they're already within their own culture, or even if maybe there's somebody that lives somewhere else as well. But um, I think that's become more of a challenge, and not just because of the distance, right? The distance of speaking through a computer. So you have to be really aware, I think. And for me, I mean, the way I am, because I'm interested, is to just learn a little bit about, okay, so, what festival did you celebrate yesterday that you were out, and what's that about? So I think there's different ways to share, but also with the larger team as well, because not everybody is, I don't know, in Madrid or something, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody, not everybody understands, okay, why do you guys celebrate this or that, So I think sometimes, I don't know, maybe having a little chat or something on Teams, or, having a newsletter where, the people talk about, I don't know, there's something about their culture can help, to just understand where people are coming from. And then just getting to know the people in your team, which can be hard, because like I said, some people are, just chatty, or they want to tell you everything, and other people are more reserved, they just want to talk about work. They don't want to talk about anything else outside of work. And you kind of have to respect that too. So that can be challenging, and then, you have to be, when you're the manager, you also have to be a little careful about, okay, what you share, because people are looking up to you, and, how is she reacting to this piece of information from the company or whatever, so um, and the way you react to things sometimes has it's a cultural reaction that you have, right? Certain things are not such a big deal for your culture, and for,
Mm-hmm.
other people might be really affected, I mean, not so long ago we had the situation with COVID, and some people not being able to have access to vaccines, and
Yeah.
things like that. Then, a war in the Ukraine, and companies not wanting to work with Russian companies, and things like that. And some people feeling like, well, I'm from Syria, and nobody had this reaction when this happened to our country. And it can get, a little politically charged if you're not careful. And it's sometimes hard to navigate that,
Yeah, but definitely, as you all say, I think that the role of your own managers or the managers you've had
Mhm.
throughout your professional life definitely leave an important mark in what kind of manager you will be, right?
Yeah, yeah,
and
no,
uh,
definitely.
and then it's like the self education, right? Continue to read, continue if you feel like you're not so aware of this cultural awareness, or you don't know so much a culture, maybe read rather than
Yeah,
in that process of knowing your team members, right? Also read on that
yeah,
aspect, or
yeah,
maybe I think that this is also something very valuable. Be part of organizations where you can discuss this kind of topic outside of your professional organization, but be in a community that has the same challenges and
yeah,
can bring you more insights.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I do a lot of searches on the internet when I hear somebody, oh, I just visited this, this beach in, I don't know, somewhere. Oh, okay, where's that? I've never heard of that, and you see some pictures, and oh, that looks kind of cool, okay, maybe I will never go. I will never be lucky to go visit, but, to definitely very curious. I think it's good to be curious as a
Mhm.
manager, just, to learn about your team and what they're, who they are and what they do. Like I said, some people don't reveal things about what they do outside of work, so that's fine. That's who they want to be. But yeah, it's fun. It's challenging. Like I said, to have people from all over now, and they're all in their own spaces, and at the same time, it can be an opportunity, to learn a lot, and you have a direct window into a different world.
And how do you keep your team motivated?
Um, I mean, when you're working in life sciences, I think we have a
Mhm.
little bit of an advantage. At least that's how I look at it, because we're contributing to making the world a healthier place, making people healthy, fighting against disease. So
Mhm.
I think a lot of people that work in life sciences were lucky in the sense that the higher meaning of your work, I think, takes a very a different or a deeper meaning, let's say.
Mhm.
So I think keeping the goal on that, I believe is something that I use, to motivate the team. Also, just okay, take our industry, and especially in life sciences, is really fast paced. I don't think a lot of people realize how
Mm.
fast paced it is, because I think a lot of people talk about tech being super high paced, but I mean, I'd say life science is pretty high up there, if not, faster paced, in fact. So it can get very busy. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of pressure on deadlines, a lot of
Mhm.
pressure on quality, and quality being super important, because if you get a number wrong, you could have the wrong person in a study. There's just so many consequences that you don't want to be thinking about on a daily basis, and you do have to keep them in mind on a daily basis. But so to motivate the team, I think is just okay, let's you know don't worry, I know we have a lot to do, but let's just you know take it every day at a time, and every hour at a time, kind of thing. Okay, let's focus on priorities. So I think for me, the motivation is to show them how to focus on prioritizing, not getting
Mhm.
overwhelmed. Like, okay, we're doing something really great. We're contributing to somebody getting access to a study that could potentially save their life, or that will save lives, maybe 10 years from now. But that person, it has contributed with their own life to that, and you're a little, smidging part of
Yeah.
it, because of course there's thousands of people involved in this. Um, so for me, that's one of the things, keeping it a little fun within the stress that we work every day, and joking a little bit here and there, when we have the opportunity. um, and then just encouraging each one to do their best, and I mean, I think at the end of the day, knowing that you've done your best
Mm.
is really kind of almost self-motivating, and I think a lot of the people in almost every team I've worked on, I think, have that just naturally. They want to do their best, they want to deliver their best work, and go home feeling like they've done the right thing, on a daily basis. So yeah, I don't know what else to add to that.
Yeah, and thank you so much because my next question was about how did you choose life sciences, but I think that you've already answered
Yeah,
the
yeah.
question.
Well, I always liked science, and it was a little bit like the writing. Oh, I like science. I think I could do this. Maybe it's very naive, but probably is. But that's how kind of how I landed in it. I think sometimes also in translation, a lot of people end up in the industry sometimes by chance. I've
Mhm.
certainly met a lot of people that have ended up in this industry by chance. And I wouldn't say it's really by chance for me because I studied translation, right? But life sciences, I would say, is a little bit more by chance, by interest, because I thought, okay, this is kind, I can do this, and this is cool. I do remember one instance when I was working prior to getting into like fully, 100% life sciences. Was I was working for a company where we did a lot of translations for the military.
Mhm.
And I mean, some of that stuff is tough, is hard to translate just if it doesn't go with your values, And I
Mhm.
remember one translator who's actually a good friend of mine, but she called me in tears, just going,
Yeah.
I can't translate this stuff. This is just awful, And I remember just thinking, well, I'm just managing the projects, whatever, not even really thinking too closely into what kind of materials we were going into. And then when she called me crying about this, I thought it is kind of awful, and so then I started looking into companies that, okay, maybe they're doing something that I'm interested in and that, I think I would be good at. And maybe I don't have to touch this other stuff that, maybe is a little tougher, emotionally and ethically for me,
Yes,
Um,
as you all say, align your professional career with your core values, right?
yes, yeah, I think that's really important. And also the companies, I for every time that I've changed company, I have been really lucky. I really like the companies that I've worked for. And part of it, I think, is because one of the things that I always looked at was what's their mission, what are their core
Mhm.
values, and really felt like they need to align with my own, and
Mhm.
even if it's not every single one, but the overall ethos of the company. And in life sciences, I found that their missions and their core values were very close to mine. So I think that also, has helped me stay in the industry. And also, I mean, I think it's a very creative industry, actually, very important, because it touches lives,
Yeah.
and with a high quality sort of focus, which which goes with how I like to live my life, and how I like to, even just little things, things I like to buy. I'd rather they're high quality than not. I mean, I know it's completely different from, working on a clinical study than, buying a dishwasher, but just along those lines, of high quality. Yeah. So
Yeah, it's really important, as you well said, to focus on your values and also identify the values of the company you would like to work for. That's something I would say as really critical when you're searching for a career path.
yeah.
And as mentioned, and you reiterated on several occasions that you were really, really lucky with your professional experience. But were there was there a specific turning moment in your life, in your professional life, that at the moment when it occurred, it seemed really challenging? Could you share such a similar moment with us
Yeah.
and how you overcome the situation?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like you mentioned, I do feel I was really lucky, and I also feel I was very lucky with people managers that I've had, and I
Mhm.
have actually. But turning moments. I mean, one of the turning moments was the one I just mentioned. About the type of projects that I was working on. That
Mhm.
were really not. Uh, not something that I really felt like I don't identify with this. And I think it's something that I learned while I was going through that. So I do have a choice. I do have a choice who I work for and what kind of projects I handle. And I think that was definitely a turning point for me. And the catalyst was that friend calling me crying, and just saying, this is really awful. And nothing against, other people love doing this kind of stuff, and that's great, but that was one. Another moment was when I was working as a writer, and it wasn't a moment that it was something that happened to me that was outside of my control. So the whole company was laid off, and the whole company closed when I was working as a technical writer. And that was something that was sort of imposed on me, because I
Mhm.
lost my job. And then I thought, okay, now maybe it's time for me to go back to translation, and I started, then looking for opportunities there. And I had been a project manager, technical writer, and that's when I started to see, okay, yes, there are other things other than being a translator. And at that point, I had already kind of come into contact with localization and the fact that there were companies that do this. They take away the content from the larger company and translate it and then give it back, and do cultural adaptations, etc., etc. I mean, at the time I was in the Silicon Valley, so this it was. A lot going on, in localization. Um, so that was tough. I mean, being laid off was a very tough experience, and how I managed it was just to keep at it, keep looking, being optimistic, just thinking, I'm sure I will find something, and I want to go in this direction, and being persistent and focusing on the direction, kind of the goal to join translation and go back into that. I'm being open. I mean, I had to move. I was in the Silicon Valley, and I moved, for a job, for the opportunity. So I know not everybody can, maybe
Yeah,
do
here is
that
again
at
the
all times.
flexibility, right? The adaptability you mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know it's a lot easier to be flexible and adapt to situations when you don't have a family, and you don't,
Mhm.
you haven't bought a house or something, right? I was younger, and I wasn't in that kind of situation. So, I realized that it's not always so easy, right? But I mean, so far, knock on wood, I've been lucky like that, that I've been able to adapt and maybe change my location or change my path, because I was technical writer, project manager, and ended up going back to being, in the translation industry, in localization, and as a project individual contributor, project manager. Um, I mean, another situation that happened was making mistakes, as a manager of people, and having somebody being quite tough with me and making me, almost cry, to realize this is, you made a big mistake here, and this is not how you manage a team, and going, you're definitely right, and learning kind of the tough lessons, that I remember a situation like that. I was traveling with a higher up executive, to do a presentation with a client. And she was like, have you checked in with your team, on this 8 a.m. before we get on a plane? And I'm like, no. Well, you need to check with your team, like, and then kind of realizing, yeah, she's right, actually. I do need to check. And just because I was traveling, I was really sort of focused on what we were going to do next. And I would say I almost went back into, okay, I'm being an individual contributor in the situation, as helping the executive with this meeting, etc., etc., and I totally forgot about my team, so I remember that moment being very revealing to me. Maybe it sounds like something really ridiculous, but it just really sort of opened my eyes, into how important it is that you are thinking about your team at all times, even when you're doing something that's you're contributing individually as a manager, But yeah, lots of situations really. I've been around for a while, so but yeah, I would say maybe those for now anyway.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing those with us. And I think that the conclusion that I draw from your experience is that we should definitely be focused on the learnings, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think also one thing I've really learned is how you react to it and how you deal with it. I mean, the
Mhm.
mistake is already there. It's done. So how can you fix it, quickly without making a mess because you're going quickly, but fix it quickly, how you react to it, what you can learn from it, and hopefully not do it again. Sometimes things happen again because
Yeah,
whatever you thought was going to be a good solution to it is not, or is not complete enough, so yeah, I think it's just important to be adaptable, creative, flexible with yourself, that, okay, yes, I'm probably going to make a mistake and, I'll try not to, but, if it happens, how can I fix it quickly and learn something from it, like you said.
yeah, that's very a very nice takeaway and important for anyone, either at the beginning of the career or throughout.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Is there anything that you would like to sum up as main takeaways or recommendations for anyone, as mentioned, either being at the initial part of their career, like recent graduates finding their path there, or for someone who is already who already has some experience but would like to pivot either from a company to another, from a role to another? Are there some general recommendations you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I think focusing on your goal, what's your goal? Why do I want to change company? Why is this company not working for me anymore? Or I'm, I've finished school, and what where do I want to go next? I think focusing on that, and sometimes things don't happen right away, right? I mean, I
Hmm.
studied translation, and then I ended up, working as a writer and then going back, so I think that's okay as well. But I knew I wanted to eventually, work in translation somehow, so I think focusing on your goal is good. It keeps your north kind of thing. Then, like we mentioned, if you are going to be working for somebody else and not setting up your own company, which is also what a lot of people do, is checking on the mission, on the culture, the kind of goals that the companies have, to make sure that they somehow align with yours. And sometimes some companies align with your goals for a while, and then you need to move on to something else. I think that's okay too. I think being consistent is really important, just in general in life. That's one thing. I had a coach for a while, and that's one of the most important things I think I learned from this coach, was just to keep really consistent with everything. And for me, that's something that's hard to do. So, just I try to, okay, you're being inconsistent now. You haven't worked out for 2 weeks. No, you have to go back to that. So it's not just in work. It's just how you live your life. Yeah, that's what I would maybe sum up with. Be consistent, keep your goal in mind. And that makes you persistent, and you get where you want it to be eventually. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm sure that these are really interesting and insightful takeaways for the audience. Thank you so much for your time
Thank you.
and for sharing your professional experience. We keep in touch, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about your career progression. So thank you, Ronait.
Yeah, thank you, Anka.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.
I invite you to follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and all other major platforms. Subscribe, but also share it with persons who might find it useful.